Okay, this is verses 4 and 5 of Dakshinamurti Stotram. Last class was Friday, wasn't it? I think everybody? Yeah, it was Friday. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Last class we covered verse 3. I can't remember. What way did the last class go? Was it verse 1, verse 2 and 3? Yeah, verse 2 and 3. And now this is verse 4 and 5. Okay, yeah. Friday class was verse 4 and 5, or 2 and 3. And verse 3 ended with...
Which page are we?
No, I'm just recapping. Don't worry about it. I'm recapping. But you would be on page 72, okay? Yeah. But I'm just recapping. The class will start at page 72 today, Vicky, okay? Okay. Verse 3 ended with the knowledge of Brahman makes you free from suffering in this life. It liberates you from rebirth in this vast ocean of suffering, but also for the enlightened person, there is no ocean of change. There is no change. Even change is not change. The enlightened person can talk about change, but change is not change. There is no change. This is what the fruit of Vedanta shows. And the implications for this are immense. Because if there's no change, there's no lacking. There's no comparisons. There's no need for judgments. There's no need for superiority, which gives rise to humbleness, appreciation, enjoyment. There's no sense of loss. If there's no change, there's no sense of losing anything, because that represents change as well, which means there's no sense of limitation, which means that even in this life, this form which is limited itself, the perception is limitlessness, purnatvam, tripti, constant contentment. Even if the mind's sad, you're constantly content. You can't be constantly content if there's idealism or expectations placed on that. Then it's not constant. Constant means constant. Constant contentment, purnatvam, is being constantly content in this appearance of change. And that's the fruit of Vedanta. So for the enlightened person, the mind doesn't have to be happy all the time. What difference does it make? That's freedom. Freedom, unconditional. What freedom are we talking about? We're talking about freedom that has no attributes. Yeah? Sorry. We're talking about freedom that has no attributes, no conditions, no limitation. So we're talking about limitless freedom. So we're talking about freedom, full stop, period. No expectations, no idealism placed on it. That's limitation. Freedom. Freedom would be one way, freedom would be another way, but constantly content in that freedom. Constant contentment and unconditional freedom kind of go well together. Yeah. And that's what we're looking at. That's what that's what sadhana, the means to an end, is moving towards. Okay, verse 4 is consciousness alone shines. And this verse has a beautiful metaphor, which is a lamp placed inside a pot. If you can imagine a pot that has been pierced with lots of holes, and you see beams of light coming out of the pot through the holes. This is the metaphor that Adi Shankaracharya uses. Jnanam, usually jnanam means knowledge, but it can also mean consciousness. And jnanam in this verse 4, actually refers to consciousness. In that consciousness, consciousness is shining like the light of a lamp. But it's not an ordinary lamp, it's a great lamp. And The pot is pierced with many holes, and light is streaming out from the pot. Okay, this is the metaphor. If something is near the pot, it's illumined, but it's illumined only if the stream of light is in the way of that. Okay, if it comes into contact with it. In the same way, and this is a bit like Richter's Rebecca now. In the same way, if something's in the way of your sense organs, such as your eye, then that object becomes illumined from this sense organ. Okay. If it's behind you, it doesn't get illumined. It has to be within the scope of the light, of the sight, okay, the pramana of sight. So, in regard to the concept of sense perception, beams of light leave our eyes and beams of light leave our ears. And the knowledge returns back. And this is the concept of sense perception. This knowledge that returns back is relayed to our mind, which means because the light is coming, consciousness is coming from our eyes, say, that illumines the external objects, it means that consciousness is coming from within. We have the body, mind, and senses. And then we have the external objects. Remember Director Cerveca, body, mind, senses, external objects. Okay. So consciousness must come from within. Okay. If you are aware, if we are aware of consciousness, if we are aware of objects outside of us, there has to be some kind of consciousness that contact with that external object, okay, and return with that knowledge of that object. And this is experience. This is what experience is. Consciousness, through the mind, through the sense organs, comes into contact with external objects and relays that information back to our minds, and our mind interprets that. Okay. So consciousness doesn't only illumine the mind, it travels out to bring the knowledge. And here there's a little bit of a difference in Dr. Cerveca, so don't try to, and Dr. Cerveca we're not taught the way Swami Tadamananda actually words us. We're taught that the mind doesn't come into contact with the sense, with the objects, if you remember. That's sense objects too, but this is just speaking, the means to an end is coming about it in a slightly different way, okay? This is why in Vedanta, some things will seem contradictory, and this part does, okay? It's just approaching it in a different way. It will all be resolved. So in this context, the light of consciousness, it not only illumines the mind, but travels out to bring the knowledge. In Director Cerveca, we speak about Sakshi, the witness in illumined consciousness, and it illumines the mind. And that consciousness illumines the sense organs, and that consciousness illumines the external objects. Okay. And this light of consciousness that we're talking about, it's extraordinary because it's present everywhere in every living being at every time. And what makes it extraordinary is that it's the same consciousness present behind the thoughts of every person. But that doesn't mean that because it's the same consciousness that illumines the thoughts of every person, that everybody can read everybody's thoughts. Because my thoughts are known to me, your thoughts are known to you. That's the difference, but there's no difference in the way the thoughts are known. The thoughts are known because of consciousness. Okay. So my thoughts, the namarupa of thoughts, the vrittis here are different to the vrittis there. But the reason the vrittis be is the same, consciousness, okay? Consciousness doesn't have particular qualities because there's no male consciousness and female consciousness. People in samsara can, society breaks down things in very detailed ways for very detailed purposes for living. But in Vedanta, we're talking about Paramarthika. There is no male consciousness and female consciousness. That's two consciousnesses. That's a problem. There's no short consciousness, no tall consciousness, no Indian consciousness, American consciousness, Canadian consciousness, Serbian consciousness, Dutch consciousness, Irish consciousness. There's no black consciousness, there's no white consciousness. Consciousness is featureless. Why? Because consciousness is limitless. Water is featureless. Water is featureless. The form of water is not featureless. Ocean has features. Lakes have features, rivers have features, waves have features, foam has features, bubbles have features. But water doesn't have features. Water itself, water is formless. So consciousness is formless. Consciousness is featureless. We can't distinguish my consciousness between your consciousness because they appear to be identical, and in Sanskrit this is called Mahadeep. It's one consciousness, Advaita, that is illuminating every living thing, every living being at the same time. It's omnipresent. And there is a question that Swami Ramananda poses. Since it's the one consciousness, which means my consciousness is the same as your consciousness, why don't I know your thoughts? And Swami Ramananda teaches that it's God's blessing. Thank God we don't know another person's thoughts. Jesus. We've enough to deal with our own without knowing everybody else's. It's like, oh my God. It's like the Johnny, you ever see the film Short Circuit? You have the robot Johnny 5. How many of you guys seen it? In fact, you seen it? It's like input, too much input. It's like crazy. Trying to deal with everybody else's stuff as well as your own. Oh God. So yeah, it's difficult to deal with even our own thoughts, never mind having to contend with everybody else's. So if my consciousness and your consciousness is identical, why don't I know your thoughts and why don't you know my thoughts? And the answer is because the one who is asking isn't consciousness. The one who is asking is this mind. This mind has there's a distinction between this mind and that mind. And that's why. This mind is separate from your mind. Everyone's mind is their own. Even though it's the same consciousness that illumines your thoughts and my thoughts, the thoughts belong to the mind, and this mind has a distinction between all of your minds, and vice versa. So that's why the thoughts belong to one mind and not belong to every mind. And it's a real, real blessing. So consciousness doesn't just illumine thoughts, it streams out from eyes, ears, nose, mouth, through skin, and everything we have contact with. And that's how we begin to know, that's how we know the world around us. Because of consciousness, you're able to say, I know. You can't say I know in the absence of consciousness, because there is no I and there is no knowing. So there's another, the metaphor goes on, which is that the sun shines and the moon shines, but the moon shines differently because the sun, it has its own source of illumination and the moon doesn't. It shines after the sun because it reflects the light received from the sun. You remember this in Victor Rebecca? We spoke about it a moment ago. The mind reflects the mind reflects consciousness from Sakshi to the sense organs, and the sense organs to the objects it is perceiving. And that's relayed back. That reflected consciousness, Chittabhasa. So the moon, we know the moon because of the sun. If there wasn't any sun, we wouldn't be able to know the moon. Okay, we know this. And in the same way, the entire world is known because of consciousness. Consciousness shines upon the entire world, and it's illumined by consciousness. And so this teaching point about illuminating the world, it can be understood in two ways, two very important ways. One is through our sense organs. We illumine the little portion of the world that we come into contact with. That's one way. And the other way is that consciousness pervades the entire universe. Verse 4 ends with this salutation is unto that consciousness that alone shines, illumining the entire cosmos, who is in the form of Guru as well as in the form of Dakshinamurti, the God. Verse 5 is the remover of the ignorance. If I remember, this is very, very important, this verse. Verse 5 is very important, yeah. I think it's similar to, it focuses on I am, I think. But I must me. So, yeah. Okay. Verse 5, remover of the ignorance. Everyone has an opinion about something. And this verse, and that's okay to have an opinion about something. Of course it is. The only problem is with, I'm skimming ahead here. The only potential problem with having an opinion about something is if you think your opinion overrides somebody else's opinion. That can be a problem. So lucky for us, in Vedanta, we don't give our own opinions. That's why we submit our ego to the Pramana. Our opinion doesn't mean anything. So this verse, it refers to the opinion on the self, the opinion about who am I. The interesting thing is that when someone says their opinion, they don't usually say it's their opinion. They state it as a fact. This is the way it is. Generally, people that give their opinion, they can tend to say that when they give their opinion that they know that it's the way it is, it's the absolute truth. They express their opinion, or they teach other all the times, especially in spiritual matters. We see this an awful lot. It's not a pet hate of mine, but it's really interesting. People have strong opinions even on spiritual matters. And Vedanta refers to them as philosophers. It's okay. Because these opinions, they're based on the individual's own orientation, which can be problematic. In the Vedanta, in our Sampradaya, it's not an individual's own opinion. It's the collective knowledge of thousands of enlightened beings over thousands of years, honed really and perfected really in the 8th century by Adi Shankaracharya. He eclipsed most of the ones before him, besides his own guru and his Parama guru, Gaudapada, and some of his disciples, really. But he was that special, that important. So this verse, it's in regard to the different opinions about I am this, whatever this is. People have an opinion about the body. I am this body. And these people, and this isn't a superiority teaching. It's just a factual teaching. We all know we've been alive in this world for a lot of time, so we know what way the world's conditioning works. So people that say I'm the body, they're materialistic, of course, and they have opinion that real in this world is stuff, objects, roles, responsibilities, and duties. That what gives them purpose, that's what's real. So they think what's real is about the person or people. Now we remember in Bhajagovindam, Shankaracharya teaches also that in your last breath, does any of that stuff matter? No. Not if we accept the teachings on reincarnation. Who gives a monkeys about the money you have in the bank, the cars you've had, the holidays you've went? Any of that stuff. Even if you're married, even if you have kids, who gives cares about it? Because in that last breath, if you have the brown and jnanam or not, if you've attained moksha or not, will determine if you're reborn again. And Puja Swamiji says, I think he says this, he might say it in this, I'm not sure in this class. Being born isn't the problem. It's okay to be born. The problem is perpetually dying. Who wants to die over and over? Dying's not pleasant, I don't think. Well, I assume it's not pleasant. You know? So why do you want to keep dying for? Why would that be a good thing? It's not a good thing. So there are, as well as modern materialists, there were ancient materialists, and they were called Karavaka. It's a philosophical school of materialism, and their philosophy about this world is what you see is what you get. They say that the world is real, and these philosophers say that the body is the real I. There are other philosophers who say I am the life force, and others that say I'm the senses. Happiness, they just want to enjoy. They seek pleasure and happiness through senses. They want to eat, drink, watch television, movies, etc. Solely do that. Other people say I'm the active intellect, the ego. Others say I am the non-existence. This is really funny, this bit actually, because I was speaking to Anya about this earlier on, and on the surface it sounds ridiculous to say I'm non-existent. I don't want to, what I should have said really. Recording now. No, it doesn't matter. I'll say it. Don't want to say it in recording in case this person sees it on Facebook. Okay, so on the surface, it sounds ridiculous to say that I am the non-existence. How can you say that you're non-existence? The people who say it are not ridiculous because they're very, very sophisticated thinkers, philosophers. Many happen to be Buddhists. There's a doctrine called emptiness. And this doctrine says there is no Atma. That this person is a combination of body, mind, senses, intellect. But there is no, Atma doesn't really translate well as soul, but Swami Thadananda uses the word soul here, so that this person is without soul and is still a sentient being. Okay. And these philosophers and philosophies express their opinion all the time, and they market their opinion in a way, or sorry, the reason behind their marketing about their opinion is that they are deluded. So I'm reading from Swami Ramananda's notes here. He doesn't pull no punches. They're deluded. They're confused. So I don't mean that in a superiority type way. I just think it's funny the way he said it. So their opinions are based on their own experience, and that's a real problem. It's based on their own perspective, their own, and this is a real problem. And this is a real problem in the age of the internet. The internet's so good, but the internet has made everybody an expert in something. You don't even need to go to college now to be an expert. You don't need to study in university. You don't need a degree to be an expert. You know, just have a lot of spare time in your hands. You know, a lot of energy drinks to stay up all night and read something, and then you're an expert. You're an expert in whatever it is. You know, even make your own certificate to prove it. So. So these different philosophers and philosophies express their opinion all the time, and their opinions are based on their own personal experience, and that's the problem, because almost certainly it's not the full truth. If we look at Vedanta, doesn't claim to have Vedanta doesn't claim to have the copyright on freedom, on enlightenment. Vedanta recognizes that Nirvana and Buddhism is the exact same thing. Vedanta recognizes that people can be enlightened even under certain circumstances, even without Vedanta. Vedanta just says that the way they teach is unique, the pramana. But the problem is, when a person is on their own personal spiritual path, and they have breakthroughs, that's often the breakthroughs they think they have aren't actually the breakthroughs that they have. Yeah, there can be a problem with Jnanam and with Sattva as well. You know, this blissful experience and knowledge, and the lack of proper teachings that makes you think you've got it, you're enlightened. You know, this the boom moment. Yeah. So, and a lot of the time, people think they have it when they haven't got it, and they start sharing that with other people. That can be a problem. In Vedanta, we don't have this because the teacher gives the student permission. It has to be the guru-shishya relationship. The Parampara, the teacher has to give a student a permission. And also, they have to be taught, they have to teach Vedanta in a certain format, in a certain way, which doesn't include their opinion. Their opinion doesn't mean anything. Vedanta, you teach them personally, or the teacher teaches them personally. So a person can have an opinion about politics, economics, about anything they want, and that opinion probably expresses some truth. We know this now in the current climate. There's a kind of thing about pro this and anti this, and there's truths in various parts. But that's why one side can debunk another side so easily. There's truths in different parts of different areas in life. But is it the full truth ever? It's hard to say, isn't it? And that's okay. A person's personal opinion doesn't usually express the whole truth, because it's based on conditioning and other people's information, which is also based on conditioning, bias, and other people's information. Okay, so we can see where this goes. That's okay. It's okay. Every opinion has its own limitation and has its own errors. That's okay. Science itself is working through errors. It's a working process. Science is a dynamic form of knowledge that corrects itself over time, challenges itself over time. Science isn't a fact. It's just a working hypothesis at this moment. Okay, so according to Adi Shankaracharya, all of these people having opinions are confused. But the Vedas, they are a means of knowledge, and they represent the complete truth. And the truth is not expressed by the opinions of deluded people. Sri Shankaracharya describes certain types of confused people having different opinions. And this is to be explored a little bit more because nowadays it's politically incorrect. The types of confused people are women, children, blind, dull, or similar. In this verse it says these types of people are deluded. They have an opinion all the time about who I am. Shankaracharya does include women, but there has to be background for that. This verse, this teaching was written in an ancient time, and he lived 1200 years ago. He lived in a very traditional setting in India. His world was of sannyasi, who were all men, so that was his orientation, male orientated. He can't be at fault for living in a time which was male dominated. Okay. Had it been now, it would have been expressed differently without a doubt, because Vedanta teachers now do express it differently. So that was his perspective, and this statement simply has to be taken as a product of the time. Okay. Women during that time were mostly living in households to do with safety. It was the men that were going to study Vedanta, the men that were studying in the ashrams. Okay. So in reality, the statement represents people who have not gained this knowledge. Almost everyone in the world will tell you that this body is me, or the life force is me, or the senses are me. Just checking the time. There are common perspectives, but as a Vedantan, you live in a world of non-Vedantans. You live surrounded by people who don't share this Vedantic perspective, and their conclusions are very different from yours, which can be challenging, because their influence as well can cause confusion. So we need to remove the wrong conclusions, and we find that that's in the last part of this verse here. Wrong conclusions are problematic because it gets projected onto the mind. This causes the thoughts to be jumbled. It's projected into our lives, and it's so strong that we wrongly conclude that the body is real, and Sat Chit Nanda Atma, that which you are, the I, is not. So then there comes to a wrong conclusion that Sat Chit Nanda Atma isn't real but a concept. Concepts are a problem, Vedanta. We don't want concepts. Well, there is one concept, which is Maya. We don't really want concepts. Because why do we not want concepts? Because we have this teaching in Vedanta called Adirupa Bhavada, deliberate superposition and desuperposition. Okay. We don't want concepts at all. Because we have to be able to throw things out, set things aside. The reality is completely opposite, in that Sat Chit Nanda Atma is real, and everything else is the body, mind, and senses is unreal. In that context, it means that the body, mind, and senses is not permanent, unchanging. Okay. The I, you are permanent. You're Satya, you're unchanging. That's what's meant by unreal. Why does, in this verse, Adi Shankaracharya describes ignorance as something horrible? And the reason is that ignorance is horrible. It is because of ignorance, guys, that there is wars. Because of ignorance, one person kills another person. Because of ignorance, there's dirty politics. There are indifferences in community, strained relationships in families, problems in the world. These are problems of discrimination, of separation, of lack, of superiority, of judgments. And this causes many, many problems in society. From the Vedantic perspective of the ancient rishis, there is no evil person. Every person is divine, because Atma, every person is also Atma, has to be divine. Every person, God is every person also, so how can it not be divine? However, Vedanta accepts that even divine people are capable of doing horrible actions, all the problems in life, all the wars, rapes, murders, they're all due to ignorance. And this is personal ignorance, which is the failure to recognize your own divinity. It's the failure to recognize that it's the non-recognition of the self that you are Sat Chit Nanda Atma. See what time's like, guys. 1 minute, okay. So, ignorance can be removed, but the knowledge doesn't come from nowhere. Generally, the knowledge comes from a source, and the source is a teacher, or could be a teacher. The symbol GU, G-U, in Guru stands for darkness of ignorance, and Ru represents its remover. So a guru is a teacher because they remove the ignorance. Puja Swamiji says that any vidya, which is knowledge, is good, but if you're able to give self-knowledge to a person, that's the greatest contribution, and this is exactly what Vedanta does. And the verse ends by, this salutation is unto that who removes the ignorance, who in the form of my Guru, as well as in the form of Dakshinamurti, who is God. Guys, 1 minute, any questions? Just made it again. No questions, no? Okay, guys, well, listen, tomorrow, everybody good for tomorrow? Okay, we'll look into deep sleep a little bit, which is good because Ian was speaking about deep sleep the other day. Or was Ian speaking about deep sleep? No? I was speaking to somebody about deep sleep, I can't remember, don't know. Well, we'll go through it anyway. Okay, speak to you tomorrow, guys. Bye-bye now, namaste. Namaste, bye.